give me a shout after 10. After 10 minutes.
At 10, yeah, no problem.
Alright, because I could go down rabbit holes.
Okay, yeah, so I'll say it whenever you guys are ready.
Alright, Don, just want to say who you are and what you do.
I'm Don Tapscott. I'm the co-author of the book Blockchain Revolution and the co-founder of the Blockchain Research Institute.
So the institute, I mean, how long has that been founded for? And what do you guys focus on?
It was created by me and my son Alex 2 years ago. It's funded by a number of large companies and governments, and we're doing 80 projects on the strategic impact of blockchain, trying to understand how it transforms a dozen industries, how it transforms the C-suite, what does triple entry accounting mean for the CFO, and we're also looking at a whole number of what we call lighthouse case studies around the world, where this technology is being transformative.
And that's quite recent then, but obviously you've had a whole career in transforming business function and process, haven't you?
Well, this syndicated project that we're doing now with the 80 projects inside it is the 12th time I've done one of these, dating back to the early 1990s. I wrote a couple of books in the 1980s that nobody read. And in 92, I wrote Paradigm Shift, which was a big book. And so I created a company based on that does this kind of work. And the model's a good one because everyone cooperates in funding the work. Then we're able to hire all the best people in the world to do this deep research. And we also deliver not just the research results, but we have a bunch of services, including an executive briefing by me or Alex.
And I mean, where is the market right now? I mean, obviously, any sort of new thing is a terrible fluctuation arc, I suppose. Where are we with blockchain and crypto?
Well, it got off to a slow start in 2008. It took people like me way too long to figure out what was going on here. It's not about Bitcoin. It's about the underlying blockchain technology, although Bitcoin's important. But the last year is really, everyone's been mesmerized by this crypto thing. We saw this giant rise in ICOs, 165 million in 2016, 5 billion last year, and 20 billion in 2018. And the sort of crypto tail has been wagging the blockchain dog for a while. But now that there's been a big correction, I think that it's sensible that people come back to what's the real pony in this pile. And that's this blockchain technology represents the second era of the internet, and it's going to be more important than the first era.
So this is important. So my 20-year career has always been online, associated to the media. And I've been describing to people that I've done things that you could not get away with now, copyright laws and all sorts of things. But a lot of fun, a lot of community spirit, a lot of democracy, a lot of good things. Obviously, Tim Berners-Lee and others are a little bit jaded with where the internet is right now. Almost the dark web is coming up the hill. Is it going to be legitimized in some way? Is blockchain going to facilitate the future? Is blockchain the answer, or is it part of the answer?
Well, blockchain represents the second era of the internet and the web, in that we've had an internet of information now for 4 decades, for 2.5, a web of information. But when I send you some information, I'm actually sending you a copy. And that works for information, but it doesn't work for assets like money or stocks or intellectual property or identities, carbon credits, medical records, votes, music, art. These are all things of value that belong to somebody, and copying them is not a good idea. You don't want someone copying your vote or your identity. And if I send you £1,000, it's really important that I don't still have the money. So what blockchain represents is a native digital medium for value, where anything of value can be stored, managed, transacted in a secure and private way. And this is extraordinary because it means that trust, for the first time ever, can be achieved not by an intermediary, like a bank or a stock market or a government or a social media company or a credit card company or so on. It's achieved by cryptography and collaboration and some clever code. So it's important vis-a-vis the web and the internet in that way. But it's also, to me, the technology that can save the web. Because right now the web is in deep trouble. And Tim Berners-Lee has been the most articulate in describing this. And I've talked to him a lot about this. And we don't fully agree, but I think he's interested in this idea that what do we have today? Well, the web, first of all, has been captured by large proprietary forces. And now most of our online activity is not on the web. It's in these proprietary walled gardens. We go into Facebook, or we go on an app on our mobile, or we go into various other apps that are controlled by Apple. And they're the ones that collect the information and manage the whole transaction and get all the benefit from it. Also, access to the web is being restricted increasingly in a number of ways. Net neutrality has been overturned in the US, and that means that the dream that Tim had, that it's like a road, you can drive anywhere, and there aren't roads where only certain people who pay can go. I mean, we have freeways, but these are all, very manageable kinds of things that may have a toll. But moving to a proprietary, sort of balkanized environment for information, that was kind of invalidating the basic principle. And also the idea that through all of this information access, we were going to create this new asset called data that we as individuals would be able to benefit from. That's been destroyed. And now we live in this age of digital feudalism, where we create this asset, but the landlord takes it away and we're left with a few cabbages. So to me, blockchain is central to solving that, because among other things, we can create a sovereign identity that we own. And it's collecting all this transactional data, all this health data, locational data, conversational data. And it's portable, and it's in a black box, and it moves around with us. We can use the data to plan our lives, we can monetize it, and we can protect our privacy. So I think that blockchain is not an alternative to the web. It's sort of something that adds to the web, but it can also help save the web itself.
It's almost like a corrector or an adjustment. We had the choice 20 odd years ago to champion freedom of information and data and everything for free versus digital entrepreneurs. We couldn't have both, but we tried to have both, right?
Yeah. Well, the web broke our intellectual property regime, and the internet, really. We didn't have a native digital medium for value. All we had was a medium to publish information. So when assets came onto the web, like a song, the only thing that we had was a publishing platform, so we sent out copies. I did this. I sent out MP3 files to my friends. And that means if you're a musician, 35 years ago, you write a platinum song that sells 1 million singles, you make $46,000 in revenue. Today, 1 million streams will get you $35, which won't buy you a mojito in the Four Seasons. So, we need to move towards a new platform that knows the provenance of assets, even information assets, because sometimes information is an asset. It's something of value that belongs to somebody.
Now, I don't want to dwell too much on this, but also you may have a view on too much information, information distortion, information overload, particularly in the media and various territories around the world. You're an expert at this. What's your view on how we correct that?
Well, it's kind of humbling for me because, I wrote decades ago that all this technology would likely bring us together because we'd all have access to the same information. I said it could go the other way. We could have people following their own point of view, and you end up in a little self-reinforcing echo chamber where the purpose of information is, it's not to inform you, it's to give you comfort for your preconceived view. I said there could be a fragmentation of public discourse. Well, that's absolutely happened. And the information that we follow, because again, we don't have a native medium for value, may be untruthful information. The President of the United States can tweet that his predecessor wiretapped him. It's not only impossible, it's preposterous. And 30% of the American population believes that. 20% of the American population thinks that vaccinations are a bad idea. An epidemiologist said, we're going to have another plague before people come to understand that science is something that's important. Almost half of the Americans are skeptical about the basic science around climate change. So, Houston, we have a problem. And again, blockchain can help us solve that because you can know the provenance of information.
Now, obviously, again, from our very limited but not insignificant experience.
By the way, Matt, that's 10 now.
Okay, thanks. I thought you were going to tell me about the fire hissing.
No, it's fine, it's fine.
Okay. A bit of a gold rush effect brings the great, good, bad, ugly to the pot. There's going to be some sort of, what would you say, balancing out over time. We have had experience of cowboys, we've had experience of flaky ideas around ICOs. We've started to work with some very, very interesting and rooted long-term ideas. And that's hopefully a shift that's market-wide. What is your view on how when is the market going to consolidate, especially moving into things like biolife?
Well, I think around the sale of digital assets, which are represented by tokens, we have had the correction. We've had a big one. And it's helping people understand what we talk about, that first of all, the real opportunity here is the underlying blockchain technology, but that we are going to tokenize many, many assets that are in a physical form or a paper form today. And that they're not just currencies, but they're things like securities, stocks, bonds. You know, you have an ICO that raises $1 billion. There's no stock market, there's no investment bank, and there's no stock, but it's investing in a company. You can have platforms where the token helps something occur in the platform, for example, Ethereum, and helps make a smart contract work. You can have a utility token where Gollum is creating an alternative to Amazon's cloud. It needs a token to compensate you for putting your computer into the network. There are natural asset tokens that can represent a tree or a barrel of oil or a synthetic asset like a carbon credit. Carbonx.ca, I'm involved in that. We're tokenizing carbon credits. You can have digital collectibles. You can have fiat currencies that become a cryptocurrency or stable coins. So when people say it's all about cryptocurrencies, they're missing what's really going on here. This is the biggest transfer of physical assets to digital assets. And we have a platform now where assets can be managed. So are a lot of these companies going to fail? Yeah. People say that. I say, well, what's your point? Most companies fail. Most .coms failed. But in the middle, there was a company, say, called Amazon that became, well, it's on the way to being the largest company in the world. It's close to that now. There's a lot of criminal activity. I'm not aware of any, but there probably is, because criminals are always the first to embrace exciting new technologies. So investors need to think about what's the real value that's being created here. And to say that this is all a bubble like tulips, I reject that fundamentally, because think about it. The Internet of Information was in the commons, thanks to Vint Cerf and Tim Berners-Lee and other pioneers like that. The Internet of Value, a lot of it is going to be owned by investors. So what's the Internet of Information worth? How many trillions of dollars? Well, if this one's bigger, there's a case to be made that over time, this will present the biggest investment opportunity ever. So buyer beware, for sure. Most will fail, but in the middle, there's the 21st century Amazon and a bunch more like that.
And focusing now on this event I mean, how have you found it? Is it what are you trying to achieve from attending?
Well, first of all, BioLife has become a member of the Blockchain Research Institute, along with dozens of other companies, and I'm very delighted. Not just because I like having new members, but because they're a very interesting company. It's very ambitious, but if they pull this off, and I don't see any evidence that they can't, this will bring about some very profound changes in healthcare. And it's kind of cool coming to a castle in the Scottish countryside to talk about all of these outrageous ideas. It's sort of the juxtaposition is pretty wonderful, as is the clean air.
Well, that's right, and also, I mean, we've been speaking to a few people about the concept of life and tech balance, for example, work-life balance, powered by technology and so on. So why not have it here? Isn't this the perfect place to have not only this event, but potentially a research lab and so on?
Yeah. Well, this is not my idea. It was John Nesbitt from 20 years ago. It's high-tech, high-touch, and this is a high-tech, high-touch for sure. It's a gorgeous physical environment, but there's some pretty interesting conversations about technology that are underway. And if this becomes, when it becomes, a node on a global wellness network, this thing will be brimming with smart objects in every wall and in everything will be not just objects that are smart that can sense what's going on, that are inside patients and connected to patients, and that are exchanging information, but objects that are doing transactions. That light bulb or an X-ray machine will go onto a distributed power grid, and it may buy some power from the roof of the farmer next door. When it does that transaction, its reputation as a trustworthy light bulb will be established because it pays for the power. So all of that is not going to go through the Visa network. It's going to go through a blockchain.
And just a couple more questions. The guys are pretty committed here. They're pretty big players from all around the world. We've got Chinese investors here. This is serious. This is going to be world class, right?
I think it can be. And, I never predict the future. I think the future is not something to be predicted. It's something to be achieved. But you want to do some modest little undertaking like reinvent healthcare. You got to have smart people. You got to have people with great passion, that they care not just about building a big business, but they care about being consequential in the world. You need to have money, and this organization seems to have access to lots of that. And you need to have a big, bold vision, and they certainly have that. So I'm not only observing them with great interest, I'm participating and trying to be helpful.
This idea has deep roots, I would say, compared to some ideas that I've certainly come across, and you will have come across many, many more. That's why I think this could maybe it's in danger of working. They have the right people, they have the right investment, right investment opportunities, they have the right locations to be the global centres. But also, would you argue as well that they're also going to facilitate a lot of ideas in healthcare globally that are spinning on their own axis without it?
Yeah, I think something like BioLife has the potential to bring about changes, not just in healthcare in general, by delivering a self-sovereign patient identity, which is portable and where patients own that information, but by opening up our models of science and research, by changing the way the pharmaceutical industry works and collaborates, by changing the nature of healthcare institutions like hospitals, how healthcare is delivered, how data is used, how technology interacts with itself and with clinicians and with patients in a hospital setting. And overall, just how we think about wellness in society. So that's ambitious. But, I've always been a person of big ambitions. not just to make money, but to as I said to my kids, live a principled life of consequence. And I think that kind of ethos is in the DNA, as it were, of this company.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.